Number 1. Mindi Chambers. Mindi was last seen in Tempe, Arizona on October 19, 1982. She left her home in the 2100 block of East University Avenue and walked her two stepsisters to school. When her stepsisters returned home, Mindi was gone and the front door was open. There were no indications of a struggle, and Mindi's purse, identification and other belongings were left behind. The last person known to have seen Mindi was a clerk at the Circle K convenience store on the corner of University and Price. The clerk saw her make a phone call and leave. The clerk said a green and tan station wagon pulled into the parking lot and the driver grabbed Mindi, pulled her into the vehicle and drove away. She has never been heard from again. Mindi's mother, Mary Zenos Chambers, was murdered in 1968, drowned in her bathtub at her apartment in Yonkers, New York. Mindi was 2 years old at the time. Police suspected her father, Alan Chambers, in Mary's death, but he was never charged for lack of evidence. Mindi lived with her paternal grandmother and then with an aunt while Alan was serving time in prison on related charges of assault and attempted rape. When she was 7, Alan was released from prison and took her back into his care. Mindi was a student at Mountain View High School in 1982. 3 days before her disappearance, she told the police that Alan had been molesting her for the past 5 years. Child Protective Services, CPS, immediately placed her in the custody of her stepmother, who was in the process of a divorce from Alan. Then she disappeared. No one reported Mindi missing until 1995. Her relatives stated she had a history of running away and they thought she had simply walked out of her life to escape her problems. CPS apparently dropped their investigation into her father within a short time after Mindi went missing. Alan died in a car accident in 1994, leaving behind 6 children besides Mindi. Foul play is suspected in Mindi's disappearance. It isn't clear whether police consider Alan to be a suspect in her case, but Mindi's half-sister stated their father drove a green and tan station wagon. Her case remains unsolved. Number 2. Cesilia Pena. Cesilia Pena, 14, disappeared en route from Manhattan, New York to Bronx, New York, on October 6, 1976. Cesilia was last seen by classmates after school, at the 149th Street stop on the number 2 train between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. Her normal routine was to travel another 5 stops to the Simpson Street station in the Bronx, where she would catch the number 5 bus to her home. Several days later, a woman told authorities that she had seen Cesilia later that afternoon at the corner of 163rd Street and Southern Boulevard, accompanied by a man she recognized as Anthony Flores, also known as Rudy. Flores was spoken to by police, but denied having been with Cesilia on the day in question. Flores is reportedly serving a 50-year to life sentence for a subsequent murder in New York. Just shy of 3 months after Cesilia vanished, another girl, 9-year-old Nolita Del Valle, disappeared from her Boston, Massachusetts home while walking to her school, a block and a half away. In Nolita's case as well, Anthony Rudy Flores was implicated by at least 2 witnesses. A sketch was released after someone claimed to have seen a man walking and holding Nolita's hand. A Boston woman contacted authorities after she claimed that Flores gave her a hat and gloves as a gift for her children. She told police that she became suspicious because Flores resembled the police sketch. The hat and gloves were identified by her family as Nolita's. Police again talked to Anthony Flores, who claimed that he found the items and did not know anything about Nolita's disappearance. In his possession were a gun and a fake badge. It was theorized that he used these items to impersonate a police officer in order to lure children away. It was stated that Flores lived in various rooming houses in Hispanic communities. I have been unable to find the elusive sketch referred to above. After scouring several old newspaper articles, searches for Anthony Flores proved baffling as well. I was curious about the subsequent murder he was convicted on, as I wanted to see if he followed a pattern that might give some indication of what might have happened to Cesilia and Nolita. Some reports state that this murder was of a young girl, while others state it was of a mother and daughter. No date of this crime is specified. All I was able to find was an article from 1982, wherein Antonio Rudy Flores, age 44, lured 2 young women into an abandoned building in South Bronx, with the promise of a job. One of the women was killed, but the other managed to escape by jumping out of a fifth-story window. He was charged with rape, in addition to the homicide. I did notice a similarity in that this Antonio Flores is listed as no permanent address in the article, which matches the statement regarding Cesilia and Nolita's presumed abductor, who lived in various rooming houses. It seems unlikely that this is the same person. The article stated that he had only been released from prison earlier that year, stemming from a 1969 kidnap and rape of a 19-year-old woman. It sounds like this guy was incarcerated when Cesilia and Nolita went missing. Searches of both New York and federal prison records have not turned up any likely matches, although there was a frenzy of media attention in Boston surrounding Nolita's disappearance. A search of Cesilia Pena in the New York Times archives yields 0 results. It was the Bronx, specifically, the South Bronx. It was the 1970s, when the Bronx was not a nice place. Abandoned tenements were being set ablaze, drug and gang warfare were rampant, and missing teens, who were considered runaways by default, were not a priority. The Bronx has seen, and continues to see, revitalization in recent years. Many of the old abandoned buildings have been renovated, or torn down and rebuilt. Many more are slated to be revitalized in the future. There will be surveyors, construction crews, demolition teams, and inspectors combing the interior of the buildings, and they probably are unaware that Cesilia is missing, let alone that she may be located, in some form, in one of these very buildings. And where is this Anthony Flores? 37 years later, he might have something to say. You'll see this sort of suggestion from me a lot. I think law enforcement has a tendency to exhaust all their initial leads, then place the case on the back burner until they receive new leads. I am a believer that the passage of time can make old leads new again. People are often afraid to talk to police initially, out of fear that they themselves may meet the same fate. But in 30 years, loyalties fade, and fears subside. If Anthony Flores had a girlfriend, roommate, brother, or neighbor at the time, I think they should be talked to, if nothing else, just to find out where these two innocent girls are. And a final suggestion: a partial skull was located in Marshfield, MA on October 25, 1976. It is believed to be that of a female between the ages of 15 and 19 years old, and the date of death is believed to be in 1976. This skull was located in the ocean, 5-6 miles off the coast, so it may have originated in Boston or New York City, both places that Flores had ties to. I have submitted this possible match to law enforcement, and will update if I hear any news on it. Their families have been waiting long enough. Number 3. Francis Tuccitto. Francis L. Tuccitto, 43-45, went missing from Portland, Connecticut in June 1953. I was unable to find any details about the circumstances of her disappearance on any of the missing persons databases, so I started digging around to see if I could find out anything about her. NAMA states that she was missing part of a finger as a result of a factory accident, while working at Russell Manufacturing Company in Middletown, Connecticut. A still unmarried Frances L. Macklin first appeared in the Middletown City Directory in 1928. Frances, who was residing at 327 High Street, was the only Macklin listed. Due to the fact that she would have been in the 1820 age range in 1928, I would venture a guess that she was in Middletown for the purpose of attending Wesleyan University. On a side note, her address of 327 High Street was also the residence of its owner, Louis de Koven Hubbard. Hubbard was a prominent member of society, a textile businessman, whose ancestors had settled in Connecticut in the 1600s. Louis de Koven Hubbard has been mentioned in news articles across several states. After Hubbard passed away in 1934, his property at 327 High Street was sold to Wesleyan University by his heirs, and was later converted into an infirmary for the school. I do not know if Frances was somehow related to this man, or just rented a room from him, or maybe even worked for him. At some point in 1928 or 1929, Frances married Joseph V. Tuccitto. They moved around Middletown throughout the 1930s, showing up at a different address nearly every year. Around 1940, they moved into this home at 17 Commerce Drive, in Portland, Connecticut, the home where she was last seen. Joseph and Frances had several children during the 1930s, some of whom were married themselves by the time Frances went missing in 1953. The 1940 census states that both Joseph and Frances were born in Connecticut, although I cannot find any sign of her on any earlier census. There were a couple Macklin families in Connecticut at the time, but obituaries of those families do not mention anything about a Frances. For that matter, neither does her husband's. Frances' husband, Joseph, died suddenly in Middletown, in March 1956, at the young age of 49. He never remarried. In fact, his obituary is the only indication of her being missing, outside of her sparsely populated missing person form. Not that she is mentioned as such, but the fact that she is not mentioned at all leads me to believe that the family weren't sure how to list her, surviving or not, so she just wasn't mentioned. This happens quite a bit in the obituaries of parents of missing persons. Newspaper searches haven't turned up any mention of her disappearance. I wish I knew more, if she seemed unhappy, if she had planned to go anywhere that day, what type of marital situation she was in. Of course, logic would say that she's deceased now, as she would be over 100 years old, but that's not the point. Her children have been missing their mother for 60 years, and I'm told time and time again by families of the missing that it does not get any easier with time. I'd like to see a resolution for them, and a proper burial for her, if she has not received one. As far as I can tell, all but 2 of the Tuccitto children are still alive, and I do hope one of them will submit DNA so that she can be matched against unidentified remains. Without DNA, it would be particularly difficult due to the fact that we have no photograph of Frances. Number 4. Melinda Creech. Melinda was placed in the Blake House, an all-girls juvenile detention facility, in 1979 after she and another teenager were caught stealing motorcycles. She ran away from the facility on September 4th of that year. In 1994, Melinda's mother, Shirley Creech, told her other 4 children that a badly decomposed body found in New Jersey had been identified as Melinda. They believed her, although no funeral service was ever conducted for the child. When Shirley died in 2003, Melinda's siblings found letters among her personal effects which stated that dental records had proved that the New Jersey body was not Melinda's. In 2004, police reopened Melinda's missing persons case. They are currently tracking down and interviewing her old friends to see if any of them have heard from her. They do not know why Shirley lied to her family about Melinda's supposed death. Melinda's siblings have described Shirley as an extremely abusive parent. There has been no activity on Melinda's social security number since 1979. Her father is now also deceased. The investigation. In 1994, Shirley Creech told her family that her daughter, Melinda, was found dead on the East Coast, but after Shirley Creech died in 2003, her other children found something puzzling in her personal belongings. A 1990 letter from a police department stated that the remains found in New Jersey's Livingston County did not belong to Melinda. Melinda's family contacted the Madison County Sheriff's Department in 2004 to resume the search. Lieutenant David Callahan said investigators put Melinda's dental records and old X-rays, as well as DNA from family members, in a database. There were several phone calls but no leads. Questions remain about the circumstances of Melinda's disappearance. Why did Creech tell her children that her daughter was dead after receiving a letter telling her otherwise? Callahan said that remains unclear. And when exactly did Melinda disappear? Callahan said Melinda was placed at the Brauenberg Children's Home on September 5, 1979, after she and a teenage boy were taken into custody. About 2 months later, a detective went to Brauenberg, which was then a juvenile home for girls, to question Melinda about the burglary, but she was gone. Callahan said an old police report from the Anderson Police Department stated Melinda had run away, but it didn't say if she ran away from Brauenberg or if she was released back to her family and then ran away. Detectives also have talked to Melinda's old friends, boyfriends and a teenage boy she was caught with. He said he remembers her, but it was more than 30 years ago. Callahan said the last time he had seen her was when they were arrested. Callahan said the boy was taken to a facility in Fort Wayne and had no further contact with Melinda. He now lives in California. The family, Melinda's brother, Daryl Creech, set up a website about her disappearance. It's titled Minty's Candle. "I will never lose the hope of reuniting with my little sister," Daryl Creech wrote on the homepage. "Until then, I will keep the candle burning. The website, which was last updated in 2007, contains several family pictures, including one of Melinda in first grade. Callahan said Melinda's siblings have since moved to Oklahoma. Where the case stands, Callahan said Melinda's case has, in recent years, remained mostly inactive. There's been no activity on her Social Security. Anything, he said. We've had all kinds of inquiries from other agencies about unidentified bodies. We've sent dental records, but so far, there has been no match. Callahan said Melinda's family has not had much contact with law enforcement in the past couple of years. Melinda's case remains unsolved. Some agencies give the date of her disappearance as September 5, 1979. Number 5. Joseph Rodriguez. Joseph Rodriguez, age 4, disappeared from Manhattan, New York, on September 6, 1936. Joseph Rodriguez was the biological son of Dora Olivo, who lived at 1350 Fifth Avenue in the Spanish Harlem neighborhood of Manhattan, New York. This neighborhood was also referred to as Little Spain. For reasons unknown, Joseph was living with an aunt, Pauline Rodriguez, and had been given her surname since she had cared for him since he was an infant. Pauline and Joseph lived at 1668 Park Avenue, a short walk from where Joseph's mother lived. On September 6, 1936, Pauline dropped Joseph off with a friend and neighbor who lived at 1637 Park Avenue, while she went away for the day. The friend, who hasn't been publicly named, took Joseph down to the street to play with other children shortly after noon. At some time later in the afternoon, the caretaker was unable to locate Joseph. The neighborhood was searched, and Joseph was not located. On September 12, 1936, Pauline received a telegram which stated, "Dear Pauline, Joseph will be back on Wednesday. Doctor won't let me move him." Until very recently, I believed, since no source appeared to claim otherwise, that this telegram had been anonymous. Through a New York Times article dated September 13, 1936, I have learned that the telegram was signed by someone unknown to Pauline. The name of the signer was not mentioned in the article. I would love to know who the signer was, and where Joseph's father was, and whether any surviving relatives are able to, or have, submitted DNA. I wonder if he had any siblings. A search of the 1940 New York City census turned up a Pauline Rodriguez, born in 1911, living in the same neighborhood, but at a different address. Living with her was a Pedro Olivo, born in 1881. I am guessing that Pauline was the sister of Joseph's father, and that Pedro was their father. Pauline was listed as divorced. I tried searching for Dora by name, and nothing came up. I also attempted to search for her 1936 address of 1350 Fifth Avenue, which was an apartment building, and seemed to find practically every surrounding address, but not 1350. That was frustrating. I couldn't find any additional records on any of them. Since I was unable to find Dora, I don't know if she was married, divorced, or widowed. No father was mentioned in the newspaper article that referred to Dora Olivo as Joseph's mother. I would think, in those days, that the father's name would be more significant to mention than the mother's, unless the father were not in the picture for whatever reason. I wonder if Dora wanted her son back. I wonder if she vanished from the city shortly after Joseph's disappearance, explaining her being missing from the 1940 census. I also wonder what the friends that he was playing with, young as they may have been, had to say about it at the time. Not a whole lot to go on here, but I find it intriguing, particularly since the case is so old. Number 6. Patricia Elayne Action. Patricia Elayne Action, age 25, went missing from Clearwater, Florida on May 27, 1978. On the morning of May 27, 1978, Patricia left her Tarpon Springs home, telling her parents that she planned to go out with co-workers after work, and not to worry if she came home late. She was to receive her first paycheck, and wanted to go out to celebrate. She worked her shift as a waitress at the Kapok Tree Inn in Clearwater, then proceeded as planned, with co-workers, to the Ramada Inn lounge at the intersection of US 19 and State Route 60. She ordered a drink, sipped half of it, then excused herself to use the restroom. She has never been seen or heard from again. The following morning, when Patricia didn't return home, her parents went to the Kapok Tree Inn, but nobody claimed to know anything other than that she had left the night before. After another 3 days, some reports claimed June 1st, which would be 5 days total. Patricia's 1969 Chevrolet Shiva was located in the parking lot of the Days Inn on US 19 in Tarpon Springs. Patricia's shoes were in the car, and there was enough blood spatter on the seats and inside the car to indicate that someone had sustained a serious injury. The blood was tested, but they were only able to determine that it was type O blood. They were unable to specify whether it was type O positive, which was Patty's type. The only fingerprints found in the vehicle belonged to Patty and her family, and the keys were not found. A massive search ensued, using search helicopters, off-road vehicles, and hundreds of volunteers on foot. No trace of Patricia was found. Patricia was said to be a responsible young lady, always keeping her parents informed of her whereabouts. No one seemed to believe that she had left voluntarily. There was a potential suspect at the time, but he has not been named. The then police chief described him as a real weirdo who had dreams too damn accurate to suit me, but were unable to hold him due to lack of evidence. It appears that at the time, law enforcement took her disappearance very seriously, and great pains were taken in the attempt to locate her. However, February 1979 marks the last article indicative of an active investigation, with no follow-up to be found. Action was last seen leaving the Ramada Inn Lounge on U.S. 19 North and State Route 60 in Clearwater at 11:30 p.m. on May 26, 1978. She has never been heard from again. Patricia had moved in with her parents 6 weeks before her disappearance, after she filed for divorce and was forced to drop out of Stetson University due to an illness. She had recently taken a job at the Cape Octrian. She had just gotten her paycheck and had gone out that night to celebrate with friends. Her parents stated they did not attempt to control her life, but she was always good about keeping them informed where she was and what she was doing. Her parents reported her missing the day after she was last seen. Patricia is considered to be missing under suspicious circumstances and foul play is suspected in her case, which remains unsolved. Number 7. Dean Richardson-Anderson. Ida resided with her family in Florida in the mid-1950s. She became pregnant in 1955 at age 18 and married her baby's father, Kenneth Gerald Anderson, nicknamed Jerry. Shortly thereafter, Kenneth was employed part-time as a musician. They settled in the Detroit, Michigan area and had 2 additional children by 1958. The marriage was troubled and Ida often wrote about financial difficulties in letters to her relatives in Florida. Ida took her 3 children and left Kenneth in February 1958. She was hospitalized due to rheumatic fever and ulcers shortly afterwards. Kenneth placed the children in a boarding home while Ida was ill. The state of Michigan took custody of their children as a result of his actions, and Ida and Kenneth spent the next 6 months attempting to regain their parental rights. Ida was scheduled to receive custody of her children in mid-September 1958, but no one is certain if she was aware of that fact. She vanished on September 18 and has never been heard from again. Ida's children were adopted by other families due to her disappearance. Her oldest son and daughter were adopted by the same family and their names were changed to Dan Borgers and Beverly Borgers. The 2 siblings were raised in Fraser, Michigan. Ida's youngest daughter was adopted by a family residing in Michigan's Upper Peninsula and was renamed Deborah Lindman. Arrangements had been made for Ida and the children to fly to Jacksonville, Florida after she was awarded custody in 1958. Airplane tickets had been purchased, but they were never used. Ida's 3 children were reunited in 1995 and began searching for her with the assistance of other relatives. Ida has not been located as an unidentified deceased victim, and a search of hospital records has proven that she was not admitted to any facilities in Michigan and surrounding states after her 1958 disappearance under her own name. Her family is concerned that she may have been institutionalized or that she is homeless and does not know her identity. Ida's case remains unsolved.